see the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut tree, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon.
that as we have borne the image of the earthly, so shall we bear the image of the heavenly. Recognizing that John is in the care of the one who made him, I invite you to join with me in prayer. Let us pray. Almighty God, you hold all people in your eternal care. O God, you breathed life into mere dust at the beginning of time. So we know you will again breathe the breath of life into John and into us, so we shall live and be with you for eternity. God, we're thankful that you created such a wonderful person as John, and we're thankful that his soul will live in you and that we will see him again. Lord, as we commit his soul into your care, we acknowledge that you look favorably upon him as you welcomed him into your everlasting kingdom, saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Holy God, you have created all things for your glory, and we praise you that John is with you forever and ever. Holy Jesus, we thank you, for you promised to take us into God's house, so we would be at home. We ask now that you fulfill us as you listen to our prayers. Lord, remove our anxiety and our fear of life, fear of death, and fear of losing control. Lord, be present with us in the gift of your Holy Spirit as we trust in you and your promise that you are the resurrection and the life. Lord, look tenderly upon your people. And Lord, as we turn to you in living faith, comfort us now that we may have sure confidence in you for all that is ahead, this day and the days that are to come. Holy Lord, we look forward to the day when we will see your beautiful face as we rejoin John to enjoy your amazing kingdom, to see the beauties that you have created, and to see the wonders you have waiting for all of us beyond this life. God, it's in your precious Son's name we pray, and all God's people said, Amen.
Good afternoon. Family, friends who are family, family who are friends. None of us want to be here, but all of us want to be here. We're here in a spirit of love for a man who knew us in many ways. For me as a father, for many of you as a mentor, as a friend, as a neighbor, as an artist, as an inspiration, as a sparring partner. He was all these things. And we're going to talk about him. And people are going to tell stories and remember who he was. And all of this, every bit of it, are different ways of saying one thing, which is thank you. We're going to have a slideshow, and it's an appropriate thing because those of us who knew my dad even a little bit know that he was a visual person. That was the sense through which he knew the world. And it's these images that we are left with, among so many other things. Alda Kelly and Mary Ceciliano. Thank you. This is a hard day. I'm brought to remember so many things all at once. You know, when we were little kids, my family would go on trips, not having picked a destination. We'd leave in the van and just head towards Toledo, and my parents would say, "Where should we go?" I remember once I said Delaware, and we went to Delaware. And it was okay. I mean, it was a pretty good trip. And you know, I was listening to a comedian on the radio talk about how people always, when they're kids and you're in a restaurant or on a trip, you see another family that's more interesting than yours. And you imagine that you're in that family and wonder what that life would be like. We never thought that. You know, we knew we were the interesting family, that we were the family that the van caught on fire. And we got out of it and watched it burn in Elyria, Ohio. And we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. That's the gift my parents gave us. My mom, my dad, this life of adventure and wonder. I remember someone told me once that the remarkable thing about the way I grew up was that it had two things that rarely come together, which was a sense of adventure and stability. And that we did have both those things, and it was a rare, rare gift. You know, my parents were not the lecturing types, and when they tried, they weren't always very good at it. But they were wonderful at modeling how to be. And we watched them carefully, and we saw what they did. They modeled a life that's well lived. You know, one of the moments that I remember where I thought, I want to be like that, was when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, a city that my parents loved very much and had been to. And, you know, a lot of other people, they donated to the Red Cross or they sent bottled water down. But some other people and my dad got together and decided that they would send sheet music to New Orleans. And at the music school at Tulane, the basement had flooded, and there was a contact there who had said, you know, we need sheet music. And I remember hearing about my dad loading the old red van up to the top with sheet music and thinking, what? Sheet music? You know, we're all watching these images of the flood coming over, but it's because he knew that place and he knew the soul of it, that they needed that too. That they didn't just need bottled water and food, which they did, but they needed that hope that things would come back. And that to be that person who sees that and provides that, that's a remarkable thing. And there's so much in that moment too. You know, music and painting, art and the sounds that we're hearing here today, they have this in common, that they both combine different things. That we hear these musicians play, the way that they play together, they layer on top of each other. And when you watch my dad paint, it was fascinating because sometimes you couldn't tell where he was going. There's two colors next to each other that when you stepped away would blend and form an image that was more beautiful than you could imagine. And, you know, in my father, there are so many things you could say that there were those layers. But I want to talk about three of them. And one was that he saw beauty. He saw beauty everywhere. And he taught us to do that too. To see the wildflowers in the vacant lot. To see the light on the side of a barn. To not just see beauty where we're told something is beautiful, but to see it in people, in places, in ideas, constantly. It makes life so much richer, that gift, that lesson. The second thing is that he created constantly, that he did things that other people didn't do. He did things in ways that other people didn't do. He always wanted to create and recreate. There's a painting in our dining room that he did when he was in his 20s. And he would come and visit and change it. He'd bring his paints, and you'd come down for breakfast, and he's like adding blue to this painting that's 50 years old, and he's still recreating it and making it something different and better. And then the third thing is what we refer to as his trailing edge philosophy. And it's this, that whenever we'd be up, up north, and the weather would be bad, and it'd be lashing rain and thunder, and my dad would say, it's the trailing edge. It was the trailing edge of the storm. Every storm, it was only the trailing edge. Because he was always focused on what was going to come after that trailing edge. And that trailing edge philosophy is a pretty darn good philosophy. And those three things, seeing beauty and creating and that optimism, all came together in so much that he did. One of the things, too, that my dad did that was elegant and beautiful was he often, when you praised him, he would deftly divert it to someone else. My mom and dad came to see our newborn son. And we said, this is John Osler III. And my dad said, you named him after my dad. Which we hadn't. In 2012, I have a blog, and I wrote a blog post about my dad. It's a tribute to him, a lot of the things that I love about my dad. And some of the things that I just said, recognizing the attributes. And he wrote a response in the comment section. And here's what he said. Mark, I would like to be the person you describe. Thank you. This morning, the first image of my father that came to my mind was of his face when he found something in life that delighted him. He was a strong man physically and had a firmness that seldom wavered, but his vulnerability that I remembered. This makes me aware that as we try to demonstrate to our children our strength, constancy, and authority, we hopefully will be remembered for our gentleness, kindness, openness, curiosity, and our ability to listen. My father's face at those moments of joy is the face I see when I think of my children and grandchildren. Thanks again, Dad. And he wrote that to me. I had a 10-year-old son, 2 older children. But it also brought back to me those moments with him. I remember being a little boy, not going to sleep, fussy. And I'd be in my bed. I had a terrible bed that sometimes would collapse. I'd be there. And I remember my dad coming into the room, and he'd stroke my forehead and say, your forehead is so tired. And then he'd stroke my cheeks and say, your cheeks are so tired. Your chin is so tired. And then your eyes are so tired. We all long for that, don't we? That kind of love. And that's what we got from our Father. And that's what many of you got in those various capacities in which you knew him and loved him too. You know, that life of our family growing up, it was full of joy and a sense of wonder. And my parents' house on Colonial Road, it reflected their passions. And it remains a place of great beauty where you can see my dad's art, beautiful light coming in. And it's a beautiful place except for the basement. The basement is terrifying. And it also occurred to me about the basement that it's like entering my dad's brain, because there's art and all kinds of photos and paintings, and there's sports equipment from the things he loved to do, and broomball brooms that were cut off and taped and glue dripped into them to make them more lethal. And paints everywhere, and these strange machines that no one understood, some clutter. And then there was this one part of it that always fascinated me, which was that there was a box of doorknobs. And I mean, there were boxes of various other things, boxes of old hockey tape and knobs and resistors and capacitors and who knows what. But it was the box of doorknobs that I was always just so taken by. It was never really explained, because I asked my dad, you know, did you go to someone's house and take all the doorknobs off? And he said no, but it was never really explained why you needed quite this many. This box here. And I mean, they're nice doorknobs, but I think it fits, you know, that he was all about opening doors, that he did that for us, he did that for so many of you, that sometimes it didn't work. My mom asked me not to tell this story, so here we go. I mean, I wouldn't be my father's son if I was obedient. So we were on a trip in New England. My mom remembers us as having a destination. I remember us as wandering around aimlessly. Could have been both, really. But Sturbridge Village was in that area, which is kind of like a New England colonial Williamsburg, where they recreate, you know, historical village. And but we got there right as they were closing. So, you know, there's this stream of cars coming out of the parking lot, and we're the one car driving in, and we park, and it's clear, you know, we're not going to be able to get in. And my dad says, I just want to go and check, you know. And so he gets out of the van, and he runs through the gates and goes up to the first building and opens the door. And it's the building where the women are changing and are aghast at, you know, my dad having, and my dad says the first thing that comes to his mind, which is, sorry, I just wanted to peek. Meaning he wanted to, you know, see what was going on at Sturbridge Village, but they're probably still telling that story there, too. And then we sped away in the van, but almost all the doors he opened were remarkable. And every one of you, if you think about it, was there with him when he opened a door in some way or another. You know, watching him paint was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I loved doing that. Sometimes we'd be up at the island up north, and he'd have an easel set up. And I'd watch him work, and he'd start something, and he'd stop, and he'd paint over it, and he'd start again. And then this image would form slowly. And then a person would appear. And then you knew that person, and he knew that person. He was opening that door and letting them into the world, and letting us into that person's world, too. We just saw some of those images that he created. He inspired a lot of us here to open doors, to change things, to go adventurously into the world. And I hope he'll continue to do so. I'd like to end with a short prayer. Pray with me if you're a praying person. If not, I hope the words make sense. We sit here in memory of a man who opened doors, who created and explored and taught and learned, and most of all, loved. Let us carry that inspiration in us and with us today and forever. Amen.
This is a song called Song for John. I was connected to John through my friend, Lucy Gaston, and his son, Will. And all I can remember every day is just the love that I received from him. That's why I call this song John. This journey, I just had this inspiration, created this song for him. Didn't know that he touches my life so much. In the life of my son. God bless you, John. Sayo malagise, jamulaifi. Sayo malagise, odamaine. Sayo malasene, holda faikunta. Tiolagis, luba. Yeleni luba, yelema luba, sayumalagise.
Thank you. And we're going to have reflections. I'm going to have some family members go first, and then we're going to open it up to others who might want to say something about my dad. What we're going to do is, if you have something you want to say, you can raise your hand, and we're going to have you write your name down on a card. And so instead of people waiting in line, we'll be able to call you up. I do want to say one thing, and that is that I had this great experience of a couple weeks before my dad had his heart attack. There was a show in memory of the artist Charles McGee, and he had a piece in that show. And some of the artists who had pieces in it spoke. And my dad he said, no, I don't want to speak. I don't want to say anything. And then after a while, I was like, yeah, I want to say something. And he got up, and he did something that so few people do, which is he knew when to stop. And I hope that we will try to model ourselves on my dad as well today. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but just, it was a memorable moment. But I want to start with my brother, Will Osler.
Star Trek and Soul Train, cliff diving and drag racing were all part of my dad's 1970s era Saturday afternoon TV session, where I was lucky enough to be his co-pilot and watch him navigate the channels, chance to see life through his eyes and see his analysis. His taste was an eclectic palette. He was open to all kinds of music, and music played a big part in his life and death. He told my mom, when I die, call Marion Hayden. She'll know what to do. Thank you, Marion, who was a kind friend to my dad. The rest of the musicians, amazing, in the house here tonight. Ursula Walker, Buddy Budson, Steve Wood. And of course, we have Pate Jassi, who just shared a song with Luis Resto. Velda and Mary, beautiful, thank you so much. He loved where music and painting intersected, like at the Loft. Hanging out and painting, listening to you guys, Luis and Pate and Solar, running into Marion Hayden in a jazz club and hanging out at the Scarab Club, where he had painted years ago, and hearing Velda's music. As a kid, he took me to Baker's Keyboard Lounge so I could see jazz legends from 3 feet away. One day, my brother came to school and said, hey, go home. Dad has a surprise for you. Took me to a solo Elton John show in exotic Ann Arbor, way out there, west side. And a few times he fired up the microbus, loaded up the family, and took us down to Bill Monroe's farm, heading down south. And up north, in a little boat fishing on a remote Canadian lake, you would get real quiet. Yeah, I'm talking about Spike. Get quiet. Soak it all in. You got one fishing trip each year and made the most of it. Soaking in the wilderness, watch the colors in the sky, the creatures, awed by nature's infinite realm. And when he'd smile and hand you a stale snack out of his tackle box, that's love. He's not a dad who said, I love you. He's not a dad who was really into hugs. But when Santa leaves you an old, used record, but it's an Elvin Jones record, that's love. We didn't always see eye to eye, but once in a while, he'd come up to me one-on-one, awkwardly, maybe fumbling for words, and humbly reach out to make peace. That's love. Spike was hit with loss and pain early in his life. He had debilitating asthma. He lost his dad early in his life. And he recognized loss and pain in other people. He would want to connect with them to hear their story. He wanted to know how people survived their own tragedy, inhumanity, suffering. He saw the light in others, and as he moved through life, more and more, he found his own life, his own light within. Some years ago, shortly after a heavy loss of my own, my dad invited me to sit with him at his art fair booth. He said, just come on out, just hang out. You don't have to do anything. He knew I was hurting. At one point, he wanted to go out and take a walk, see the other artists' exhibits, see their work, get something to eat. So, I got you, Pop. All right, I'll hang out here. So there I was, surrounded by his canvases, looking around at the faces in the portraits. They looked back at me. I felt their collective spirit, and I felt the healing of his art. Those faces reassuring me, saying, you'll get through this. Later that day, I watched my dad creatively deal with thoughtless ignorance. We're sitting there with his canvases at this art fair booth, and a guy walks up, a little angry, says to my dad, what's your deal? Is that all you paint is black people? What are you, racist against whites? My dad takes a breath, thinks for a second, squared up with the guy. He said, I paint people who interest me. A checkmate. My parents were two Detroiters who fell in love. And in recent years, Spike and Phyllis punctuated each other's days with lively discussion, work, with mutual Detroit love, live music, meals together, time with friends, neighbors, family, cracking each other up, recounting their crazy adventures. They sought simplicity and shared a commitment to social justice. I watch and learn now as my mom holds his memory close, feels this devastating loss, and yet she is also stepping back into life, not yielding to despair. And as Spike and Phyllis always have, savoring the good moments. And please know how much my mom appreciates all the support and kindness from friends, neighbors, family. Like Mark said, he was an optimist in a lot of ways. He'd see a soaring raptor and maybe speculate, hey, that's an eagle. Maybe that's an osprey. Sometimes it turned out to be a high-flying gull or maybe a hawk, crow. Sometimes he was right. And we would stop and observe the magnificent creature, soak in the vastness of the scenery. He saw storm clouds. Say, that's the trailing edge. Sometimes the trailing edge takes a long time to get here, but it comes around eventually. Thanks for being here today. Peace.
Yeah, and I'm going to have my sister, Kathy, you signaling me Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, but, I'm calling on you now. So, but when we get to the point where we're gonna allow people to speak, if you wanna have a chance, please raise your hand, and Jeff Planska or Eric and Karen Frakes will come around and take your name. We'll be able to call on you instead of have people wait. Kathy?
Hello. I wrote this, I realize I'm writing it to my dad, so. It's so hard to say goodbye to you, Pop. You made life so full. There's a big emptiness without you here. Because I wasn't an easy kid for you. Not very coachable. But as a great father, I think you liked me that way, except in tennis. Those times when we got to paint together, it felt like we were in sync. You never interfered with my creativity or my weird ideas, despite having so much knowledge and wisdom to share. You wanted me to go my own way. And for that, and a million other reasons, I'm so, so grateful to have you as my guiding star in life.
Right, and my daughter Lily couldn't be here today, but I asked my son John to read what she wrote for this.
So, yes, this is what my sister Lily wrote. I'm sure many of Granddad's other family members and friends have shared their favorite sayings of his so far in this memorial. So let me contribute one that I'm pretty sure no one else has called dibs on yet. No, you teach me how to change the propane tank. This was his maxim at the island whenever the gas would sputter out under a pot of pasta in the cabin and a grandchild or two was within hearing range. We'd walk down the moss-licked steps to the dock, where we were instructed to teach Spike a skill he already knew, and we didn't. This often ended poorly, once infamously with someone yelling, "Run, run," at the assembled crowd. But it always ended with us learning how to change the propane tank. This was how Granddad taught, with a method even more trusting than the Socratic, waiting for his student to complete the assignment before the lesson even began. As a kid, I found the role reversal infuriating. When I was living with him and Grammy the summer I was 12, he waited for an hour as I attempted to fix my bike before showing me how the cables connected. Years later, at the DIA, he would deflect questions about what he found moving in art, instead asking me, a 12-year-old Philistine, what I liked about a given painting. I wanted help, and he offered only the insistence that I did not need it, over and over. Or at least, that's how I saw it when I was a kid. In transgender Christian communities, it's sometimes said that God made our bodies imperfect the same reason he made wheat but not bread, and grapes but not wine. He is inviting us to share in the act of creation. If Granddad were here, I'm sure he'd object to me comparing him to God. But, well, here we are. What I will remember most about him is the way he always insisted on his own humility, his bafflement at the very idea of hierarchy, his grace in allowing the least of these to teach him. I have never met a person more egalitarian, more prone to believing that the man begging for change at Eastern Market was precisely as much his neighbor as the bankers who lived on his block. I have never met a person so constantly interested in the idea of every other human being he encountered, who saw the people whom he helped meet at crossroads not simply as objects of his charity, but peers, siblings, fellow artists, friends. It feels like it would be wrong to call him selfless because, of course, he was fully aware he had a self, serious and joyful and opinionated and brusque and tender. He just understood, in a rare and clear way, that everyone else had a self too, not just as worthy of dignity and respect as his own. Even his shy 12-year-old granddaughter, sullen and anxious and terrified of what she knew to be true about herself even then, deserved the same respect and autonomy he did, the same opportunity to teach and be taught in turn, the same chance to share in creation. These days, I live in an apartment block near downtown Minneapolis where I have very little need to change a propane tank. Yet I find myself thinking often about what I gained from Granddad's teaching methods, whether I'm trying to put together a piece of IKEA furniture or struggling to find the wording of a story's ending. I find myself believing in my own competence. There is no sense or reason in the sudden loss of a grandparent, and I do not want to reduce his sprawling, untamable life to a moral. Still, I found myself feeling lately that the best way for me to honor his memory is to pay his special gifts forward as best as I can, to open my heart to being taught by those who expect me to be the teacher. Thank you.
Right. Well, I'm going to ask Marion Hayden and her friends to step up, and we're going to have some music, and then we're going to continue, and I'll call on people who have put in their names. Thank you.
This piece was written by Dave Grusin and by two of my favorite lyricists, Marilyn and Alan Bergman. And it's from the movie The Champ. What matters most. It's not how long we held each other's hand. What matters is how well we loved each other. It's not how far we traveled on our way, but what we found to say. It's not the springs we've seen, but all the shades of green. It's not how long I held you in my arms. What matters is how sweet the years together. It's not how many summer times we had to give to fall. The early morning smiles we tearfully recall. What matters most is that we loved at all.
Thank you. And I call on Rob Gage.
Whoa, there's a lot of you here. When I first met Spike, he was 31 years of age. I was 25. The year was 1965. I had just arrived from California, and I had hired to be a photographer at Photo Center on Willis Street in Detroit. Spike was working at the studio as a rep, and he was basically selling for 5 different photographers who specialized in automotive imagery. He asked me, "Rob, what do you like to shoot?" And I said, "People." And in about a nanosecond, he decided that he would plan the rest of my life for the next 12 months. He said, and I quote, "I will be happy to show your people images, but if you want to make a decent living, you need to know that you're going to have sheet metal included within your portfolio." That was something I hadn't expected, but over the next 12 months, I knew kind of what I had to do. So he said, "I will be very happy to show your people images, and you have to know that every Friday I am going to give you an assignment. You have to do the assignment over the weekend, and when you come to the studio on Monday, you have to present me with a portfolio of, a Polaroid, of your efforts." And I went, "Oh my God," because I was only recently married and I knew this was going to be a problem. As winter approached, I thought that he would lighten up on the location assignments. Come on, I'm from California. I don't even know what cold weather really does to you. And so I told him that as a Southern California native, that when the temperature got to be below 50 degrees, we called out the National Guard. He just looked at me and smiled. The winter assignments were brutal. My body really never adjusted to the harsh climate. Some Mondays I would show him a Polaroid covered in snow. Little by little, I realized he was helping me to succeed. All the hard work, it started to pay off, and we plugged away for the next 6 years. Now, I don't know how many people have ever had the pleasure in the audience here of looking in Spike's trunk of his car. It was amazing. He loved sports. Inside of his trunk, he had the most unbelievable assortment of, and I will quote, broomball gear, sweatshirts, various shoes, some of which never matched, bits of grass and dirt from the last sporting event he was in. Now, the interesting thing was that when it came time for him to do his song and dance routine with clients, he had to then attempt to clean off the dirt off my portfolio that was also in amongst this. And occasionally I would hear later, clients said how much they enjoyed the presentation that Spike meant, that he gave. But what they really thought was interesting was the addition of the vegetation on the portfolio case. In 1971, I left Detroit and I moved to England. I opened up my very first studio there, and Spike figured that he would continue to show my book and see kind of what happened. Well, to my surprise, he ended up getting projects back here in Detroit, which meant 7,000 miles of flying round trip to keep peace in the world of repping. During these trips, I stayed at Spike's home. Phyllis was most gracious and cooked incredible meals and poured ample quantities of wine. On the wall in his living room, there was a portrait of Winston Churchill, which was frigging amazing. I asked what he knew about the artist, and he surprised me saying he had painted it. I asked why he didn't do artwork professionally. His answer was simply that a better living could be done through hustling for photographers. In 1994, Spike wrote to me in California, and I would like to read just an excerpt from what he said. Dear Rob, as I have more time now to search for and enjoy friendships, they have become more meaningful. They have a life of their own, not part of a business or a convenience. I find I can have friends without our needing anything from one another. I hope I never stop searching for art and love, as these have been depths that we cannot ever be completely satisfied with. Regards, Spike. How lucky for me to have met a person who cared about me and went to great lengths to be a friend and mentor. He will never know how much he molded my life as a photographer. Thank you.
Michael Horner.
Hello, everyone. John was a good friend of mine. We met years ago, and he finally he did my portrait before he passed away. Like a lot of my friends, I mentioned, I say this is not my black friend, my white friend. I say this is my friend. John, we talked and we laughed about a lot of things, and he touched my heart. And it was such a great honor to know he and his family. Phyllis was invited. I was invited to come to the home. We sat down and have some lemonade and things like. We talked about life. Period. John was just a great guy, and I told him I'm gonna have to come out there and get some lessons. He said, "You already know." But John, he told me. He said I would have him laugh so much all the time. And I would have him laugh about different things, and he would tell me, he said, "You know what, your bio is not big enough. We're going to have to rewrite it." Just as well, Mr. Paul Curtis right here, we talked about a lot of things, about life, period. And just so great to know a person such as John, because his heart was for people. And that's what I am. I like to give, and John gave his heart. Just want to let you know. And well, these are words I like to say. I guess I got them from the Lord. I have to say it because the worst thing is to get back home and wish you had said something. This is what I like to say to all of you. Tears have no color. Pain is the same, sorrow is the same, love is the same, blood is the same, and joy is the same. And when you hear children laugh, you don't hear a dialect and laughter, you just hear laughter. You don't hear a black laugh, white laugh, African-American laugh, Asian laugh, you just hear laughter. And tears, you can have tears of joy also. I just want to thank you. Thank you so much.
I knew they were precious. Sandy.
Hi, my name is Sandy Shopbuck, and I didn't put Shopbuck down because nobody ever knows how to pronounce it. I never knew John Osler. I only knew Spike. And I knew Spike because I think that's how most of us knew him. I ran the Bird of Paradise for a long time, so we had jazz in common. A friend of mine, Jan, knew him from down at the Detroit let's change names so many times, the Jazz Festival. And she said to me one day, this guy Spikey, he's having this show at the Scarab Club. I don't remember what year it was, Phyllis, maybe you do. And so we went, and we talked, because he talked with everybody, because he was very nice and very polite, and he had things to say. And it came out that I lived in France because I was an interpreter, so that was where my career was, and his was here, but he loved France. You both did. And so he invited me down, and Jan also, to Le Beaussais, down in the Provence part of southern France. And we went, and they were staying in a kind of a castle-y, wrecky type place that was up on the hill and very dark, and there was food that was made, and I don't remember which one of you made it, probably you, and a fire was made, was set, and we talked and talked and talked until the late hours of the night. So Spike for me was jazz, he was art, he was France, and I'd like to call him a friend. And now, Will, you're going over and staying in my place in Paris, and you are going to have to take care of your father's painting of the saxophonist, and maybe you'll know who it is. But it's up there on the wall, and he can keep an eye on you, and you can keep an eye on him. And that was Spike. Oh, I love it.
Jeff Plansker. Well, you have another.
Can you guys, okay, good. I've got it on my phone. One moment. Well, I knew Spike at birth because there are three families in my life that basically made up my upbringing. My own, the Planskers, the Oslers, and the Frakes family. This was the three constants of my life. And so I've knew Spike since I could know a person. All right, I wrote a little impressionistic list to then be quite abstract, to then be followed by something concrete. This is called Mr. O, the palette of Spike. The congenial, the gregarious, the gifted, the I, the committed, the supportive, the representative, the enthusiast, the explorer, the curious, the courageous, the asthmatic, the eyebrows, the inspired, the artistic, the empathetic, the bloodhound, the artful dodger, the advocate, the articulate, the inarticulate, the determined, and the positive. In a photograph, Spike is holding a rifle with me, my mother, and my sister Jenny as his family. This was an ad campaign called Must, Men United for Sane Thought, that came right after the Detroit riots. So, you know, you saw the photos out there where he modeled for, was it Hiram Walker? Yeah. So anyways, he's the model of that ad. Spike drives us to Bean Blossom, Indiana, in the family Volkswagen van for a bluegrass festival, stopping along the way to seek out antique toy cars and photographs of us kids with potato guns in the cornfields. My dad tells me when you see Mr. Osler after a period of time, he's already begun the conversation and you're walking into the middle of the third paragraph. At least, so I was in a band with Spike, Mr. Osler, Spike, John's son, Bill, Eric Frakes, and myself. We're in a little band called Jabaz in high school, and we rehearsed for at least 3 years, maybe 4, in the Osler basement. At least 4 years of loud band rehearsals in the Osler basement, playing bass alongside hockey equipment and stacks of broken car radios. Mr. and Mrs. Osler sitting upstairs watching The Muppet Show. Right. All right. And lastly, well, maybe not last, there's a few others, but I'll jump to the last. Spike appeared to me in a dream, this is years ago, with hair like Harpo Marx and bright silver braces, and looking both like himself and Roger Daltrey. The only way communication was possible was by shaking his hand, by which you could hear his voice as an electrified R2-D2, vibrating and intelligible. I told Spike about this dream, and he said, that's how he usually feels. I'll close with my dad, Dennis, Jack Frakes, Spike Osler, were to me Detroit's big three. Towering giants. And we love you, Mr. Osler, and the colors you painted our lives with.
Mandisa Smith.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mandisa Smith, and in 2013, I became an accidental gallerist. And that's a long story. I won't bother you with all that. But I went into my friend Karen Brown's store, Savvy Chic, at Eastern Market one day, and I was astounded by this amazing painting of this very regal Black woman, and I had to know who did that. That is just so beautiful. And she told me John Osler. I'd never heard of John Osler. I think Karen gave me his number. I think that's how I got in touch with him. I got in touch with John, and I asked him if he would show his work at my gallery, and he so graciously said yes. And it was the most wonderful month. I think in that year we were keeping work up for like a month, which wasn't nearly long enough. But the really wonderful thing about that was it opened me up to John and Phyllis's love. They both embraced me. They came often to the gallery. They became my friends. And I didn't mean to cry today, but I am going to miss John so much, as we all will. We had many wonderful conversations about life, about art, and as you all know, he was the most gracious, loving man, and I'm so grateful that he came into my life. Thank you.
Eric Perry.
Thank you. Spike, or John, as we called him, played an integral role in shaping my career. When I met him back in 1989, I was a young, aspiring photographer trying to figure out who I was and what I could be. John and his three gracious partners offered me a shooting position at their studio, Midcoast. To this day, the best thing that ever happened in my career. The next year or so, Spike and myself spent countless weekend mornings shooting from sunrise to noon. All that time, Spike teaching me how to see and express myself through my camera lens. He was also teaching me how to see the beauty in most things that surround all of us every day, except for I was probably a little too immature to understand that. It wasn't always easy being around John because he had so much to offer and so much to express. He had so many ideas and visions. Some days I wish I could go back and relive some of those moments to get all fired up again. Several years passed and Spike retired from the studio. One morning I walked in my office and saw a note on my door. It was from Spike. It said, "Eric, be ready, willing, and able, and you will get all the things you want in photography, except those things you desire the most. Those you only get by luck and not being too sure of yourself. Enjoy, Spike." I understood the first part, but I guess it wasn't until I became more of a successful photographer and artist that I understood the second. You know, when I went out to take pictures, I couldn't control the sun. It was either gonna rain or shine. I couldn't control the talent always, or if the car that I was photographing was gonna show up on time. That was luck. But you know, when I look at some of the pictures that I enjoy the most throughout my career, what I took for myself, it was because I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying something new. I was experimenting. And I think that's what Spike knew. He knew that. What a gift. You know, I've been lecturing to students for 20 years. In every session, I end the class with that story from Spike. I got it right here in my brain, and I could say it 100 times. I've had so many mentors in my life and my career, but I never had a mentor that taught me how to see. And for that, I'll always be thankful for. I'm a very blessed man too, because I have a wonderful family, a wonderful career. But I've been blessed because Spike Osler has been in my life. Thank you.
Eric Frakes.
Well, we're all pretty good fakers. I've been smiling a lot today, seeing people, and I know my smile hides a tremendous amount of sadness. I know your smiles do as well. But I know a good part of whatever smile I have, and the smile I have in my eyes, I owe to Spike. I've been asking myself in the last couple of months, how do you fill the hole that's left behind that's the challenge. How do you fill that hole that's left behind? I've known Spike for over 50 years, and you can't help but see a person's humanity in 50 years. You see all the wonder that was Spike. But, you know, I saw contradictions and I saw inconsistencies at time as well. But what the takeaway here is, when you see all that and you still love a human being as much as you possibly can, that is the true measure of a man. And I feel that way about Spike, and always will. Okay. I'm not a mathematics guy, but I've thought a lot about proportions in these last couple months. I taught 4th grade. We didn't get into really complicated math, but I thought a lot about proportions. And I've thought of this sadness and this hole. And I have to say, the sadness put next to the gratitude that I have for knowing Spike, it's just, it makes it go away. It's not even close. It's not even close to the respect and the honor I feel for being able to call him a really, really good friend. As Jeffrey mentioned, I also had 2 mentors in my life, other than my own father, Spike and Dennis Plansker. And he was, in a way, growing up, very much like a second father. I didn't need another one, but Spike rounded out the picture, I have to say that. And what was really wonderful is, as I got older, that part kind of went away. He just was a really, really good friend. Guy I could rely on. We traveled together, and we traveled east for weeks at a time, back at a time when he was looking for what he was going to do with the rest of his life, and I was trying to get myself started. I got to spend time with him in France, traveling. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I know I need to keep this relatively short, so I'm going to move on to how I think we can all help fill this hole that's left behind. Get outdoors, get out in a pine forest, breathe the fresh air, look up for the northern lights. They're up there. Look for that trailing edge. It's there. Believe in it. Watch the North Shore light up with the sun. Get out and look at art and wonder about the world. Talk to everybody. Spike would talk to everybody. It didn't matter if they spoke English or not. He spoke to everybody. He'd even speak to Republicans. Listen to a lot of music. Folk and rock and bluegrass and definitely a lot of jazz. Spike was the ultimate improviser, and I really think that's why he loved that music so much. His life was this wonderful improvisation. And I was thinking also how much Spike would want to be here. He would enjoy this event. He'd want to talk to everybody. We'd be here till Tuesday, because contrary to what Mark said, Spike did not know when to stop. Maybe once, but for the most part, he did not know when to stop. And he'd talk to everybody. Anyway, the one thing he would not like about this is all the attention he would get. Because my wife would tell Spike, hey, you know, you're my absolute favorite painter in the world. I love your work. And he would squirm and want to talk about something else. He did not want to talk about himself. So that part of it, he would not like at all. So I think he'd give my blessing at this moment to do something I want to do. And maybe as much for Spike as for me, he'd want to honor a couple of people that we didn't really get a fair chance to say goodbye, and people he loved. One is Dave Etnier, up at the cabin. It's SAG. Dave passed a few weeks ago, and I know I didn't get a chance to say to Dave how much he meant to me, and I know Spike probably didn't either. And the other is Dennis Plansker. 3 years ago, Dennis passed in a hospital bed by himself because of COVID, and I don't think any of us ever really had a chance to say a proper thank you and goodbye to Dennis. So anyway, I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to stop with Spike's words because they're some of the most beautiful ones I've ever heard. It was at Stephen's memorial service. Spike said, lives will end, but love lives on. And thanks, Spike.
All right. Beth Buchanan.
Yes, there's a lot of people here. First of all, I just want to give my sincere condolences. My sincere condolences to all of the Oslers, and really to Detroit. When I think of him, I just think just a lover of this city of ours and everything that is part of that city, the beauty, the pain, the gain, the loss, and that was one of the things that I really, one of many things that I took away from him was his love of Detroit. And when we would have a chance to talk, and he would just talk about like the veterans and you know, I remember that there's a place for us. I remember him telling me about that with the veterans and how those two lined up. And I'm going to end now because I could just ramble, but I just feel very blessed, grateful to have had the opportunity to know Mr. Osler. Thank you.
Evan Friggs.
I just moved into a 100-year-old house and I just really need a doorknob. I will say this, if you'll indulge this opportunity. It's inspiring to hear enunciated this life that we take for granted. So if you'll indulge me for thanking my parents, Jack and Kathy Friggs, who are, in some funny way, the antithesis of Spike and Phyllis Osler. And yet, what a combination. What just thank you. I'm glad for your friendship with Spike. And having us all together. So I don't think I need to say much more than that, other than to say, I hope I spoke for some of you out there who are thinking of people that you're remembering and want to thank, and maybe you should turn to thank those people by the end of the day.
Betsy Robinson. Do you want to bring can we bring a mic down, or? Okay, let me see if we can get you a mic. This one? Is that live? Okay.
Short story. I'm John's sister, Spike's sister. And when we were in high school, I was painting. There was a and I was so proud. And I took it in and showed it to Dad. And he looked at it and he said, he said, but don't you get it in your mind that you're going to be an artist. And your brother too. And you have to be the very best to make a living at art. And I thought, well, I really don't want to. And he said, I don't want either of you to think that you're going to be an artist in life. You can't make a living at it. And wouldn't he be proud if he could see today what my dear brother did? He would just, I know he knows. But I wish he could see it. We're all so proud of him. And won't we miss him? Deep in our hearts. Thank you for coming, every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Marion Hayden.
Thank you. I just want to say my condolences to the Osler family. My name is Marion Hayden. I'm a bassist and part of John's music family. And I just wanted to be sure to let everyone know how important John was, not only to me personally as a very dear friend, but someone who really saw us as musicians. If any of you have had a chance to go to the Dirty Dog Jazz Cafe, then you saw some of John's tremendous artwork, some just beautiful paintings. But the real thing that you may have missed is when you go down the hallway to our green room, there is a whole archway of his photographs of us and how he elevated each and every one of us. Many of us know that we're not going to all be, get rich doing this. You play music because you love it. But when people like John see you as for the person that you are and for your creative soul, and then take the eye, his beautiful eye of through his camera and capture your soul that way, that means more than anything else. It's way long lasting than anything anyone else can give you. And I've been captured by John many times, and then he even created a really beautiful book on Detroit jazz. If you have not seen that, I don't know if it's available, but you should get that book. It's just tremendous, and the cover of it has a picture of one of my mentors, Will Austin, who was just a fantastic bassist. We lost Will during the pandemic. And so I just want to say, thank you to Phyllis for sharing, and the family for sharing John with us. And also, the other side of John is that he was really quite a rabble-rouser. And a lot of our conversations were not just about music, but they were about how the two of us were going to reinstate music lessons into the Detroit Public Schools, just the two of us. And he had plans, and we were getting ready to do that before the pandemic started. And then after the pandemic was over, probably about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before he passed, we revisited that idea. So just so you know, he was a man of many thoughts, and he had a lot of drive and ambition, and he was definitely somebody who was a revolutionary in his own way. So thank you very much.
Luis Resto.
John, was one of the coolest guys I ever met. His wife Phyllis, same. And I was really fortunate to meet John 12 years ago. And it feels like I kind of knew him forever because I would see his paintings at all the jazz festivals and stuff across the years that I would play at. And then, you know, the musicians in Detroit, very tight-knit community. And so to see the paintings and then to come to DeVries Cheese Shop in the Eastern Market. I came there 12 years ago and started renting the half of the third floor, and John was already there. I think it was before David reopened from old Our Hurt. I hear history, though. So I came up to the third floor, and the first thing I saw before I met John was the skylight of beautiful light that he was using right in the children's portion in the third floor. So I came to meet John, and it was definitely kindred spirit. It was, I hear the stories now of him having lots of minutia in his van and, you know, kind of starting a painting and then going back to it. And if you ever come down to the loft on a Saturday, I invite you. I'm the same way in that I just like searching, and I love music, and I love having it open for people to come play and make sounds on whatever's there. And John was really similar. And as it ended up, he then moved all this painting stuff next door so that on a given Saturday, when music was happening and jams were starting up, it actually became sort of like a whole carnival scene where I knew how cool John's work was, so I'd go, you have to check out next door and just go through those doors. And so it was really magical. You'd have music happening here, people would go to the other side, and John loved to tell stories, and he'd come back out, and I'd see him behind them smiling, and then he'd bring people that he was talking to into the loft to hear what we were doing. So it became that way, kind of a back and forth trade, you know? And I loved hearing the stories, and I would always force myself to stop and hear everything he had to say because it was just deep, always. And we'd share that way over 12 years. And like I say, I don't even know if that's when I first met him because it feels like I knew him for quite a longer time. Then I come to meet Phyllis, and we'd have dinner at their place, and just wonderful people. And he's going to be missed, as you know, everybody's going to feel that. But I remember him in the best light. In fact, it was just a month ago that I was telling Will, I was playing, a group of kids came in, and that same feel of sending them to the other room, I did. And I went to take them over, and there's still some of John's paintings and stuff there. And so I turned them on to a big bass drum that's back there, and they hit it, and they were amazed at it. And I go, and look at these paintings, too. This cat was amazing. And as I'm bringing him back over, it felt like I was kind of channeling John, you know? And, yeah, forever missed, and I love the time I had with him. And it was special. That's it.
Channeling John. That's a pretty good message. And I think I've run through all the, I haven't missed anybody, have I? All right. Well, we're going to have a postlude. I'm going to give a short benediction. I urge you to stay for the music. And then after that, there's going to be downstairs. No. Out in the lounge, there's going to be a reception, so we hope you'll stop by there. But thank you all, for my mom, for the family members, for all of us who are here. We needed this. And there's a spirit here. It's my dad's spirit. I'm so grateful for that, to have this moment. Thank you for that. We walked in today as very different people with one thing in common, one man who we knew. Send us out into this world carrying within us what he was, we will see beauty. We will create. We will live in the trailing edge. With love, amen.
In a mellow tone, that's the way to live. I'm not alone, I've got company. Everything's okay the livelong day with this mellow song. I can't go wrong in a mellow tone. That's the way to live. If you mope and groan, something's gonna give. Just go your way and laugh and play. There is joy unknown in a mellow tone. A mellow tone, feeling fancy free. I am not alone, 'cause I've got company. Everything's okay the livelong I can go wrong in a mellow tone. That's the way to live. If you mope and groan, something's gonna give. Just go your way and laugh and play. There's joy unknown in a mellow tone.
All right. Thank you all. That's a great way to end. It's what my dad would have wanted. And now he wants you to talk for hours. Really? Then you'll probably end up using it. So, oh yeah.